Once again, thank you for your time, and I will give the floor to Johanna and the rest of the panelists here. Thank you so much.
Hey guys. So I know we're not seeing the film, but this discussion is just as exciting, I promise. So I'm Johanna Ferreira. I'm the deputy editor at HipLatina.com. I actually saw the film last night, and I'm really excited about this panel because it actually aligns with a lot of the content we do at HipLatina.com: social justice, Latino identity, and racial identity. So first I'm gonna have everyone on the panel introduce themselves. So just give your names. We have to kind of move along quickly. Just give your name and the cause you're aligned with.
I'll start. Hi, my name is Luis Hernandez. I fight for criminal justice reform and gun violence prevention.
Hello everyone, my name is Ramon Contreras. I fight for gun violence reform, and I fight to get more young people civically engaged and out to the polls.
Hi everyone, Carlene Pinto, immigrant justice, police brutality, electoral politics, building campaigns for women to run for office.
Hi, my name is Paola. I fight for gun violence prevention and overall peace.
So the Hate U Give focuses on the power created when people come together as a community in protest. Each of you understands the power of the Latinx community and also understands the injustices that we face daily. How do each of you use your own voice to promote and advance social justice? I'll start at the end.
So starting as an activist from really young, I basically got into the activism world by literally fighting for justice for my body. And I've evolved, and now I fight for many more causes and different issues. And I can say that I use my platform by supporting other youth. So if I have a classmate that's not engaged whatsoever, I would tell them about the work that I do and get them engaged and get them excited. One of the efforts that I've been pushing right now with my gun violence prevention organization, For Guns, is getting people out to the polls and voting for candidates who are actually going to put in place, on a national level, gun control bills and laws that would protect the youth. So literally tomorrow I have a takeover of Union Square with Women's March Youth in Power, where we're going to be registering voters all throughout. So my platform is based on getting other youth involved, and especially in the Black and brown community where I'm from and where I still live. And ranging from school to my building and my neighborhood, I just get others involved.
That's great.
Repeat the question one more time.
How do you use your own voice to promote and advance social justice?
So when I first started getting involved, I was a junior in high school. Well, it was going into my junior year. And as many, schools will call a kid who doesn't get good grades or who, is always getting into trouble, they'll call him a troubled kid. And I was still trying to find my way, a passion to just trying to get back on track and get focused. And that passion came through community service, which I did out of my school and in the South Bronx. And through that, through doing food drives and clothing drives and just connecting with my community and my school and doing town halls, I noticed that my service and my civic engagement is just as important as everybody else's. And if I can get my peers to do these projects with me, then maybe we can start a change. Maybe we can start to shift the culture of the way people look at Black and brown youth in this country. Maybe we can actually do projects to give back to the community and actually do projects that the underclassmen would be inspired to do. And I learned to mentor young kids, which I did my senior year, and through that, I worked with Luis on the Youth Over Guns March, which, we did a huge march across the Brooklyn Bridge, for Black and brown youth who are being massively incarcerated because of the school to prison pipeline and are being shot and killed by guns and are ending up in more caskets than in cap and gowns, right? And from there, I've just been trying to engage the youth. I went on a summer tour to over 65 cities with the March for Our Lives kids who had to go through the tragedy of the Parkland shooting. And there we did town halls, we engaged with young people, got them registered to vote, and had those valuable and deep conversations, those intimate conversations that sometimes with people who disagree with us that led to agreement and led to some type of peace and unity within a combined message of where we want this country to go. And specifically with Black and Brown communities, we engaged with different cities like Philadelphia. We went to the same spot where Mike Brown was shot and killed with his father on Father's Day, and we shed light to injustices that happen in Black and Brown communities. We shed light to mass incarceration. I visited juvenile centers and spoke with kids there, and are still in contact with them after they get out, trying to get them civically engaged. So my work is just trying to find, trying to connect with people's passion, and using that passion to get them back involved in ways they can give back to their community.
How do I use my voice and my platform for others? So I'm a little bit older than my colleagues on the panel. And I think with that comes the idea that I've been in the movement probably since I'm 16. I got involved too because I was fighting for somebody I loved. A close friend of mine who was 16 was charged with a homicide to which he didn't commit. He did 12 years and he just came home 2 years ago. So it's been a crazy process even trying to make sure that he was able to land on his feet. I use my voice across spaces. I have a really powerful energy and people always say that to me. And so I use my energy to tap into other people's energy to get them inspired about anything. Right now, there's too many things happening and too many things we're fighting for people to be disengaged from voting because no one taught us how to vote. To be disengaged from caring because the issues seem too complex. Like, I've been watching their work on digital media and reaching out to them saying like, good shit, you guys are reminding me why it's so critical that both I keep doing the work and I keep paving a way, but that we keep looking back at the 12, 13, and 14-year-olds that are looking for a way out of this as well and are ready to take the baton that you guys are ready to pass. And then I'm ready to pass the baton to you all, and like we all should keep running. The main thing in New York is like, who's a proud New Yorker here? First of all, I've never said to a crowd, who's a proud New Yorker? Y'all was so quiet. Who's a proud New Yorker? Can I get a yer? Right? So when we think about being proud New Yorkers, unfortunately, New York City is such a small demographic of our state. And when you leave New York City and you drive through the Hudson Valley or you end up close to our borders in the north, it's a different world. And the way this federal government operates in our state, under this new federal government, is very different too. So Customs and Border Protection can patrol 100 miles interior of the borders. How many borders do we have here in New York City or in other parts of upstate New York, right? Those are questions we never ask ourselves. But when we say we're proud New Yorkers, voting in New York City is critical, but how we talk about and engage in voting across the state is even more critical. How many of y'all have been to Albany? How many of you have been the last 2 years? Okay, do you guys work at, well, I know you two in the back stop it because y'all work hustling resources from Albany. But the reality is that the decisions for our state happen in Albany. And so if we pay taxes, 1/3 of our money, even young people, when they start to work, 1/3 goes to them. How are we holding those people accountable? And so my voice and my platform and everything is used to remind people that they have the power to do anything to change these circumstances too. And whether it's sitting up here next to these folks or sitting at your church in this same seat, having a conversation with your folk in your communities and networks, it's critical that everyone has these conversations.
How do you use your own voice to promote and advance social justice?
So a couple of things that I have done, you go out and demand for what you want. That's what I've been doing. And it's not until you do that, you realize that what we want is already there and you just have to take it. So that's why we have been working so hard to have a grasp on that. And we keep having our ideas and we keep working on those, and
can we give her a
once you're there and you're demanding everything that you want, you already know that it is within you. So everything that you want, you just have to embody that and be what you truly need in this world, in your community, in your country. Anywhere that you go, you have to be that. You have to be what you need.
Absolutely. All right, so you guys didn't get to see the film, but like Star, many of our Latino families come and live in neighborhoods that are notorious for all the wrong reasons, right? So drug dealers, shootings, crime. Some of you may have even grown up in these neighborhoods, and yet here you guys are today, smart, powerful, young activists, all taking a stand. So what did your relatives teach you that other Latino families and parents can learn and instill in their own homes? Starting from the end.
I think it's what my mom specifically taught me was just to be outspoken and to never conform to whatever authority wants you to do. So
right.
If you feel uncomfortable with what your teacher's telling you, it's okay to question it. And that's what I've always done since a child. It may come off as disrespectful, and as Latinos, parents tend to shut their children off and shut them up when they respond or question something. But I think that being that my mom allowed me to do that, and being that my mom allowed me to be more open and be myself, it allowed me to become the person who I am today. So now I fight for criminal justice reform. So I question my authority till this day. I question the governor. What are you doing to support the mass bailout? What are you doing to end mass incarceration? I'll question my assembly members. I'll question my borough president. And I'll do it fearlessly because it's just something that's within me. So that's one thing that you can do, and something that other Latinos could do is just be supportive of one another. Nothing is just about you, so be collaborative. Invite other people to amazing spaces, network with everyone, and provide those networks to those who need it. Don't be greedy with resources, share, and just be in community. We have to support one another to actually come out on the top. And from one Latino to another, and we're all Latinos here, we just have to stand up for what we believe in, stand alongside each other, and support each other in whatever we want to do.
Absolutely, thank you.
Sorry, repeat the question one more time.
So what did your Latino family instill in you that you think other Latino families could instill in their children?
I mean, growing up, the reason I believe that, I headed in the path of activism and being engaged was a lot from the story of my grandfather coming from Dominican Republic for a better opportunity because of, very poor there. He didn't have, much money. He came here to make a better living with the American dream, and became a garbage man here and worked in sanitary. And he ended up being incarcerated and went through the criminal justice system. My father then went through the criminal justice system and was incarcerated along with my uncle, who was later deported. And growing up, I had this cycle of kind of like violence. And, growing up and like always visiting juvenile centers, always visiting jails, always figuring out that, oh, somebody in my family's in jail now. And something that my mom, which I'm grateful for, she always taught me, even when I was confused, jail was a bad thing. If you were in jail, you're bad, right? Because that's what we're taught. But my mom taught me to still love my father, to still love those family members that were incarcerated, to still love those people that, were not, in prison for the wrong reason, but were in prison because of the system that they're trapped in, right? And growing up, something I do my work out of is peace, love, and unity. When the media is reporting that there was a gang shooting, right? And that there's criminals, and all this nonsense, it's all bullshit, right? At the end of the day, it's a system. There's a school to prison pipeline that from a young age incarcerates our Black and brown youth, right? There are systems in play, like questions I always ask myself, why are there more books when I go to an upstate school? Why are their libraries filled with books? But when I come to the public school where I grew up in, right, there's only a couple books and it's half empty, right? That shit makes no sense. So I always question my community. And when I see something that is supposed to be wrong because society told me it's wrong, I remember my mother's lesson. I remember the lessons of my family and the struggle of my family, and I question it. And I say, this doesn't come out of a place of wrong, but it comes out of a place of misunderstanding and injustice. And that's the lesson I take with me in the work that I do.
Thank you.
The lessons that the Latino community has taught me about activism. So I'm probably an activist because of all the things that my Latino relatives told me. I'm Cuban, and so when I was 6, everyone in the family used to call me vaso de leche. So for people that don't speak Spanish, that's cup of milk, because my skin was so fair. So one thing I'd say is the Latino community taught me what colonialism looks like. The Latino community taught me what indifference to prejudice looks like. Although in my household we had values around dignity and respect, and it didn't matter what people's skin color was, as soon as you left my immediate household and I saw my abuelita or anybody else, it was, you know, the class divides around race, around socioeconomics and race. And so I think one of the biggest reasons why I do the work is because I know I'm so privileged, and that I have cousins that are Black that haven't had the same access to opportunities or have been able to code switch. So that suits them, right?
We're gonna talk about that later.
Yeah, and so the reality is my mom taught me that I come from a long line of women that fought, and that there were all these other social movements that came about. And at a really young age, even though people call me cup of milk, I was reading and learning about the Young Lords. And so when you hear about people in the 70s, you know, no one came to clean up trash in their neighborhood, so they put all the trash on one corner and they burned it up. Now everyone's coming to pick up the trash, right? That was their solutions to issues in their community. And I was so inspired by that stuff at an early age that I always felt like there was a way out. And the systems that are created, to their points, are created to put us in a corner and to put us in a box and to tell us that there are not ways out or better systems.
Thank you.
So shout out to my mom, because she came with me today. But something that my parents taught me is to always respect yourself so that everybody else can respect you. And whenever you walk, you respect yourself and respect everybody around you, because that's how you learn respect. My dad's a janitor, and he's always talking about how where he works, they're always treating him like the special janitor, because he learns how to respect himself no matter what he does. Like, it could be a doctor, he could be whatever, but it's just the amount of respect that you put in yourself. And where we come from, in the Dominican Republic, in Salcedo, is known for the province of the Miracle Sisters. I don't know if you heard about the Miracle Sisters, but not too long ago, there was a dictator who took over power in the Dominican Republic, and he was in reign for like 30 years until the Miracle Sisters came and fought against him. And he then sent to kill them, but everyone was furious about that. So we later were able to get him off of the reign and got our country back. But that inspired me to know that you have to be the change, and that is what I have become, being the change.
Thank you. This question goes out to Ramon and Carlene. We'll start with Ramon. The Black community's answer to mass gun violence without retribution birthed the Black Lives Matter movement. Why is it that our numbers grow, our purchasing power is over-indexing, and yet the population's true strength at voting polls and speaking out against police brutality is not impactful enough? What should we be doing differently as a Latino community, and how can we create change? Where does the change begin?
Man.
It's a loaded question.
College, that's easy about it.
No, but when I go out to vote, right, I don't feel like a lot of young people, too, a lot of Black and brown young people, there's not really people who represent us that are voting into office, right? One of the hardest things, I've been traveling the country and I've been talking to, a bunch of young people, mainly white people, because these are the people that show up to all the rallies across the country. And we tell them, yo, you go vote, right? And these kids are like, yeah, let's go vote. But then when we go to a community and it's in a city, majority Black and brown students, we're like, go vote. We make it such an easy thing, we make it sound like an easy thing, but it's not. It's not easy to vote when for years and decades a government has never represented you. It's not easy to vote when for years and decades the LGBTQ community was never represented, the Muslim community was never represented, right? And a lot of times it's a lack of hope and a lack of faith. that if we vote, if we actually are civically engaged, that, you know, we will get the results we want. And a lot of times we get angry and we protest and we grab mics and we are passionate about the things we're saying and we're so vocal about the demands we want. But at the end of the day, we have to transfer that to the polls, and we have to make sure that we have people that are running that look like us, that represent us, and are saying the things that we need to hear, right? I don't know if you guys, I guess you guys follow politics, but like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, right?
Love her.
You know,
Same.
you know, like her campaign like was amazing. It was so grassroots. She connected with the Hispanic community, right? And like she gets up there and like she says what she has to say. And we say, okay, like we hear you, like, you know, we can connect with you, right? We don't have politicians like that who are running for office that we can just connect with, right? There's politicians that are running for office that majority of the time white people can connect with, and not necessarily, you know, me. So I feel like we need more of our people to run for office. We need to make sure that our people are prepared and have systems in life so they can actually run, especially women of color who most of the time are saving our asses from, you know, the all the time, all the time. But it's going to take time, it's going to take effort, training, it's going to make sure that we have a community of unity and that we can't be separated by these systems that are created to make sure that we are never unified, and we're never a full community. And it's going to take training and making sure that we have, you know, everything we need to support our people when they do run for office.
I'm gonna pull a question. Can you repeat the question?
So in other words, what should we be doing differently as a Latino community to stir change?
What should we be doing differently? Everything he said, absolutely right. One thing that I see lacking right now, context. How many of you have donated to a political campaign in the last 2 years? Show of hands. How many of you have donated to a political campaign for a woman of color that was running in the last 2 years? Okay, so that's highly problematic when we talk about what could we be doing that we're not doing. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wasn't the only sister of color that was running in New York to help make change. She also was supported by lots of white organizations and lots of white people that are now showing people of color that you can't be an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez unless you have the DSA and lots of big white organizations to help you, right? What we need to do is understand that Latinos have so much power. We're 28 or 29% of the population in New York State right now, but in the New York State Senate, of 62, is it 62 or 52 in the Senate? 62. Of 62 state senators, 62 counties, yep, 62 counties. Sorry, guys. I'm lost this too. So the 62 state senators in New York State, there have been 12 years that there had not been one Latina in the state Senate. So this is the legislature that controls legislation for the entire state of New York. 12 years. We are 29% or 28%, and there hadn't been one Latina. And then the one Latina that ends up getting elected, gets elected and she ends up aligning with people that helped get her there. She delivers everything our community needs her to do. Half the people that were mobilizing against Senator Marisol Alcántara didn't even know that she brought landmark legislation to the table for Latinos. She got funding for mental health services because young Latinos are killing themselves at higher rates than anybody. White folks pointed the finger at her and said she was a part of the IDC, and they came in and took her out. And so when we talk about Latinos and us having power and conversation and dialogue and being able to disagree without taking each other out, that's a critical part of the conversation we're missing. When we're talking about our money, where we put our money, that's a critical part of the conversation that's missing. And what can we be doing differently? We can be aligning ourselves with Black folk more frequently, all the time. I live in Esplanade Gardens. I'm telling you all my business. I'm in Harlem. I'm in a complex of 6 buildings, 26 floors each building, 6 buildings. We have the strongest electoral power in Harlem. Espaillat lost the congressional race 3 times before he won the 4th time because he couldn't win the Black vote in Esplanade. We need to be like and see what other communities, other groups are doing around us, be able to bring them to the table and align our votes with them so we're stronger as peoples of color and not just the LatinX community and the Black community, because that's not what they're doing. They're gerrymandering, they're changing district lines, they're making us run against each other, they're making it divisive, we're Black versus Latino. It's like, wait a second, we both care about reproductive justice and healthcare. We both care about criminal justice. We both care about guns off of our street, but here we are fighting with each other in Harlem, in Washington Heights, in the Bronx, and none of it makes any sense because when you look at who's making all the money, it's these big firms that are coming in to do these campaigns, none of us are voting or mobilizing our vote, and then we're not mobilizing our dollars or our support of other people. And so it's critical that besides the electoral piece and who we're electing, there's chiefs of staff that make $75,000 a year if they work for the state. They make maybe $80,000 a year if they work for the city. Those are all great positions that all help change what our communities look like, that we're also not putting people of color or women of color in. And so like really infiltrating the systems, because all the systems are designed against us. And even, you know, if we're not strategizing with other peoples of color, the Muslim community, right? Nobody cared about Muslims. People said Muslims don't vote. In Brooklyn, in Bay Ridge, Justin Brandon, who just won city council last year, they ran a reverend who was an Arabic Lutheran reverend, and he got 30% of the vote in that district. He lost by like 3 points to a white man from Bay Ridge. This brown man mobilized all these Muslims. So people are looking at the polling sites, all these people in hijabs are running in to come vote because their community organizations mobilize them. Linda Sarsour was a part of all of those efforts in that local community, and she helped put a lot of money there. But it takes money because our communities are so traumatized. I don't know how many times any of y'all have door knocked in the projects, but I did it this last cycle and nobody opens the door. And so we have to really talk to our family members. We have to figure out those local cornerstone sites that are our community hubs, and we have to be talking to people everywhere. Don't be embarrassed to ask your Uber driver, like, hey, where you from? If they sound like they from Queens and that they American, be like, well, do you vote? And even if they sound like they're an immigrant, like, oh, tell me, when did you come here? If they've been able to legalize their status, they should be voting. The biggest problem right now is that all of us that have citizenship are not running to the polls. There's 11 million people that are undocumented that can't vote, and we're not even voting for them. And they're getting plucked up left and right, delivering pizzas to bases, and we really have to step up, both as a Latino community and as a Black community, but we have to step up together because demographics are with us, and it's scaring the hell out of the opposition, and they've been planning this moment for a long time, and we just sitting here unprepared for it.
Thank you. This question for Luis. Latino males are more likely to be shot by police officers of their own ethnicity in predominantly Latino neighborhoods than they are to be shot and killed in ethnically diverse neighborhoods. Why do you believe this is happening, and what can we do to stir change?
Back to what I said before, we need to start being supportive of one another. In my community, when my brother faced what he did, and he was incarcerated because of corrupt detectives and a corrupt precinct, most of the detectives in that precinct are Black and Latino. So it was shocking to see that these people come from your own community, and they were, some of them from that exact same community, and they came to become police officers, and now there's some sort of difference. It's what Edwin Raymond, who's an outspoken member of the NYPD 12, who's fighting against our unjust quota system, right now calls the blue wall of silence. They have some sort of brotherhood once they enter the force, and they feel like they have to stand in solidarity with the white man in their precinct rather than with the Black or brown man in their community. And there's a really huge disconnect right there, and I think that as a community, we do need to start having community events where we get more involved with the police officers in our communities and have much more community policing rather than over-policing in the communities. So we need to start building the trust, and we need to start actually calling out those who are not being effective, because all of that eventually translates into gun violence. So then the first step is incarcerating the person for no reason. The next step will be shooting and killing that person for no reason. And most of the times it's our own people. Black and brown police officers kill Latino and Black citizens for no reason, and it's not always the white officers. So we need to start holding each other accountable for our actions and not always blame the next person or the next community. We need to start getting more involved and holding each other accountable.
Looking within our own community.
Right.
Yeah.
We need to reflect upon ourselves, and we're no one to make judgment of anyone eventually, but we need to just start holding each other accountable to standards and reminding police officers that you come from this community, your blood, we run the same blood, we're from the same country, or we're from the same region, or we grew up in the same city or the same neighborhood, and we shouldn't have this huge disconnect.
I love that you mentioned that. Also, and that we've spoken a lot about like the Black and Brown communities, and there's kind of this disconnect, this misconception that there are Latinx causes, there's Latinx movements, and there's Black causes and Black movements. And a lot of Latinx don't feel like they need to get involved in like the Black Lives Matter movement, for instance. And I know Carlene touched upon this a little bit earlier in the panel. What can we do to unite more as Latinx with the Latinx and Black community, and like how can we be there to support each other's causes and movements together? I'm gonna ask Luis this question again, and then we'll bring this down the panel.
So I think it's all about accountability. Like, I'm gonna be completely blunt right now. I know a lot of Latinos, some even family, who are like of lighter skin complexion, because my mom is white with green eyes. A lot of people see her and say, oh, that's your mom? Yeah, that's my mom. And she got with a dark-skinned Dominican man. She's Puerto Rican. So there's a huge disconnect. A lot of my family was critical and criticized her when she got with my father, because in the Latino community, there's racism upon one another, even if you're not of African descent, which we all are ultimately African, and we have African in us, but they don't see that. They don't see that just because we have different complexions, we all should be together and be one as a whole. So it's like when a Latino is racist of another Latino, I just don't see how that's possible, and that's why when I see to bring in like the media and stuff, there's this woman who's on Love and Hip Hop. She rocks this huge afro, and she marches around calling herself Afro Latina. A lot of people didn't understand the phrase Afro Latina, and that just goes to show how there's just a huge disconnect right there within our community, because they don't understand how we can intertwine and we're all mixed and we're all bred, but at the end of the day, we're all still Latino or Latinx. So we need to first hold each other accountable, make sure that there's not racism within our own community, and after that we can expand and actually work with one another. We need to show each other that. And that's one of my biggest things, is show that I can stand with a Black brother and sister, I can stand with a Muslim brother and sister and still be just as powerful as them, and we can be on an equal balance. There's no need to feel like we're suppressing them, because at the end of the day, if we fight amongst one another, that's just giving our white counterparts the upper hand, like, oh, they're already fighting, so now let's catch them while they're fighting because they're weak now, and let's suppress them even more. So it's just like there's been a system built up against us for years on end, and if we don't get together soon, then we're gonna end up nowhere. And that's just my message across the entire board. When I speak to anyone, I just make sure, like, even within my family, like I said, like I have racist family members who sometimes say, like, they call them monkey, they call some Black people monkeys, even if they're of the same color, and I say, like, do you hear yourself? Like, you come from the same community as them. I might have a different skin tone, but you guys were raised the same, you guys speak the same language, have the same traditions and culture. So it's just, we need to start checking one another and holding one another accountable.
Totally.
I'm mad that's even a question. It's crazy to me. You know, this even happens, so I identify as an Afro-Latino, right? And when I talk to my friends who are Latino and Black, and I tell them this, or like I'm speaking at school and I say this, a lot of the times my friends, what are you talking about, right? And like, you know, people, they clown it, people are like, oh, you're just trying to be extra, you're trying to be like all this ethnic stuff, like, nah, that's who we are, right? And it's just, you know, like Luis, like I was like, he's preaching to the choir, like he is really saying everything that needs to be said. Like, you know, those are our brothers and sisters, right? At the end of the day, when we're walking down the street, right, a cop is gonna stop us no matter if we're Black or Hispanic. They're gonna stop us, right? We're not white, right? We go through the same struggle, you know. The Black and Brown community, you know, are living in poverty, right? When it comes to actually having economic opportunity in this country, we don't have the same equal economic opportunity as our white counterparts. Like, we don't, right? And you know, when there's this battle between Black and Hispanic, at the same time when there's systems and laws in place that prevent Black and Brown people from being able to be successful in this country, it's like we're fighting a bad. It's like we're getting on a ship that's already sinking, right? And we're just drowning ourselves in this fight, you know, for justice and freedom, right? And you know, looking back at the civil rights movement, which is a big inspiration for, I know, a lot of activists, right? A lot of the messages and a lot of the chants and a lot of the music was all about unity, right? And not just unity between Black and brown communities, but unity between all Americans, all people. You know, no matter your color, no matter your religion, gender, sex, you know, this is a country that was founded on the belief that all men are created equal, right? That you can have men and women, apologize.
No, but it was founded on all men.
Yeah. All white men.
Yeah, exactly.
They actually had an asterisk that said not blacks.
But you know the foundations of the country are the philosophy of it is possible. And it will exist someday. And that is a country where we all have the same equal economic opportunity. That is a country where we all can have the same opportunity to go to college, to have a job, to make a living, to have a home, and have the pursuit of happiness that we all deserve. But it's gonna take unity within our people first, and accepting the fact that, yes, you're Black and Hispanic, and that, yes, we're in this struggle together, and no, there's no competition between struggles. We're in this together, and the only way we're going to move forward is with unity, and if we love one another. Because that's all it takes at the end of the day, is all love, right? Yeah. All this, you know, and I have a lot to say, and, you know, just from personal stuff that I've gone through, you know, doing this movement. You know, when I did the march with Luis, trying to convince, you know, some of my friends to come out and support and to march with me, you know, for Black and brown lives, right? You know, sometimes I heard, oh, Hispanic people don't get shot as much as Black people do by cops, or they're not affected as much like Black people are. I'm just like, yo, bro, what are you talking about, right? And like, you know, these are things that we are talking about. Like we had demonstrations in school, we had town halls. And it's like just trying to get on that level with whoever you're talking to, like, yo, this shit is real, this shit is happening every day. You live in the projects, I live in the projects, we're going through the same struggle, right? When your parents are struggling every day to put food on the table, my parents are struggling every day to put food on the table, right? There's no difference between me and you. There's no difference between anybody. We're in the struggle together. And, you know, if we're gonna continue to be on that road to liberty and freedom, we have to be united.
Everything that both of them said. I think that context is really important when we talk about unity, right? Right now, there are more refugees in the world than at any other time in recorded history of the world, right? So when we put that in context right now, that means that when we talk about the Black and brown community uniting, one major thing too that's an issue is how we unite depending on someone's ability to assimilate into culture. Right? And so one big fight I had up in Harlem with Black folks in Harlem is that they don't care about Black immigrants, right? It's like across the board, we have a lot of unity to be done, because when we put in context what's happening in the world, when we put in context who we are as peoples, and generations ago, where were our parents or grandparents' grandparents, right? 4, 5, 6 generations, most of us are, unless, you know, folks can trace back to, you know, cotton fields here, if you're Latino, you weren't here. Right? Like, let's just be real. 6, 7, 8, 9 generations ago, where were your relatives? Probably back in your homelands, right? So when we think about today and we think about the unity we need, I think a lot of it too has to revolve around empathy and compassion. Because as these folks are fleeing from their countries and coming here based on Lord knows what's happening there that we caused directly or indirectly, because we overhear all types of gluttonous, right? What? I can't watch the news. You know, I can't watch international news because you are looking at babies' bodies washing up on the shores. You're watching people, you know, swim for their lives, literally. You know, I don't take for 1 minute granted that I was born here in America when my grandmother was born in a town in Cuba that no longer exists. Right? I was there a month ago and I'm like, but where is this town? And they're like, she was born in 1912, it doesn't exist. Right? And so when we talk about where we are today as peoples, it's important that we think about us being little blimps in time. Like literally, we don't know whether we're gonna die tomorrow, tonight, 10 years from now, 100 years from now. And all of this, conversation we're having in the mainstream about unity and like oppression, it's like if you look back 500 years ago, this was the same stuff that was keeping people from being able to unite and be their best potential selves. And so the quicker we can get off the hamster wheel of like what's dividing us and all this other stuff and just start showing up better. I'm in spaces all the time and I'll be with a room full of black folk that don't know me. As soon as I walk in, I have to acknowledge my privilege. I have to be quiet the entire meeting until it's my time to talk, right? Or unless they call me in as a specialist to give them advice, it's not my place to tell a bunch of folk of color what to do about anything impacting their community. Now, if we want to have a conversation about what I do for my community that's impacted and how we can work together or share solutions, that's different. But like, just how we show up every day has to change. The conversations we're having has to change. The accountability on what we're doing next has to change. And again, I just urge people to think about the context, like the moment we're living in right now, everything that's at stake, everything our parents and grandparents fought for to get us here or to keep us alive, right? I don't know about y'all, but it was hard to keep me alive when I was young. I didn't listen to anybody. And so that is really what I want to anchor, and folks having the power to do anything. And people right now are fleeing for their lives all around the world. And most of us, probably all of us, are privileged enough to have a home to go home to. And how do we use that, right, for each other or unity or to support others when we know all of our communities are under attack and they don't have homes or safe places to be?
Coming from like, the Dominican Republic and all of that, the people that I come from are afraid to identify of themselves as how they are supposed to be identified. And that just, it kind of doesn't make sense, because why do you have to be afraid to fit into what society is telling you to fit into, but then it's not really what society is trying to fit into? It's like a whole circle. In the Dominican Republic, Trujillo massacred a lot of Haitians just because they couldn't pronounce parsley the way it's supposed to. Not only did he massacre Haitians who couldn't pronounce it, but he killed Dominicans who were dark complexion that could not pronounce that word. They were born in the Dominican Republic, but he still killed them because they couldn't say the name of a season the way it's supposed to. So people are afraid to identify themselves with what the name that society is giving them. And they can't take that name because if, God forbid, they take it, they'll get killed. They don't know what will happen to them. So they try to avoid it as much as they can. And I feel like until we can move away from all that is, all these identities, all of these things that don't really define us, because what you are here in this physical, it's not what you really are here inside. The way that you are brought about in this world, and the way that other people see you in your eyes, in their eyes, is not who you really are. So until we can move away from the sight and all of these labels, we can't progress as a society.
Thank you. We're a little pressed on time, so now we're going to take questions from the audience. So any questions you guys want to address to any of our 4 panelists up here, feel free to raise your hand and I'll pass you the mic. I know you guys got questions. Okay.
Nobody asked a question, we're going to do sign-ups for campaigns in this house.
That's a great idea. So I'm here listening to you guys talk, and it takes me back to the election year of 2016. And one of the things that I remember that was very prevalent that year is people saying, like, what's the point in voting? It's just Hillary and Trump. What's the point? Why do I need to vote? Like, it don't matter if I vote. Like, it's just those 2 options. Why do I need to go to the polls? And I bring that up to ask, like, what is the, I don't want to say that the point of argument, but what is the discussion that you think one should have with someone that says, like, what's the point of me voting? Because I'm not sure if people understand that so many people of color fought for our right to vote.
Not fought, died.
Died. Yeah. And so I mean, when they would tell me that, I'm like, okay, I guess these are the only two candidates that you know, but now I don't know how to like let you know that your vote still matters. So how do you go about the conversation of letting people know that your vote matters, even if you only see two people? Or some people say like, Trump sucks, and they're like, you know what, but like everybody else sucks, so I'm not gonna vote. That's like what they go to, and they say, no, but like, So I never know how to like communicate with that person. Like, okay, you're only seeing the one thing, but like, your vote matters. So like, all right, you don't like these two candidates, then vote for somebody else or something. I don't know, but yeah, there's a question in there somewhere.
I mean, yeah, for the most part, like, I bumped into that same argument for the, like, throughout the whole entire 2016 election. People were like, Hillary's corrupt and her husband was already president, so it's like having him president again. And Trump is just horrible, we don't want Trump. So it's like, I don't feel like voting, we wanted Bernie. That was the whole entire argument throughout the 2016 elections. But it's like, my response was, what fight do you really want to fight? Like, do you want to fight against a racist and a person that stands against everything that you stand for? Or you just want to have Hillary and push her a little further to be a little better and stand up for our community and be great? So it's like, literally, my question was, what battle? Like, choose a battle. Because at this point, and people are like, oh, but we don't have to vote. Our vote doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, it's not our decision because of the electoral. Yeah, so that was the whole entire argument. And my response was literally always, what battle do you want to fight? And always your voice counts no matter what, because your electoral vote is supposed to be reflective of what the people want as a whole. And like, I remember I was like shook when I saw that Trump won Florida by like 1%, I think it was. And it was like, that was like a whole swing state. So it's like, if we could have organized and mobilized at least 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 more voters to go out and just vote for the better candidate, then we could have won Florida and we could have potentially won the race. So it's like, at the end of the day, it's like, what battle do you truly want to fight?
I don't know what party people affiliate themselves with here, or if you do, but I think we can all agree that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party messaging sucks.
Yes.
They're terrible.
Their message was better than the other guy, pretty much, like in 2016.
I mean, look at the midterms now. Democrats are saying Trump sucks, vote for me. Republicans are like, we love Trump, let's keep loving him. Like, it makes no sense. It's stupid. It's lazy politics, and it's not connecting with the people who are actually supposed to be voting, right? And this summer I got this question, like, even to this day, why should I vote, right? And like I said earlier, it's different when you're talking to people of people of different demographics. When I'm talking to my people, I say question your community, question the reason why your building looks this way, why there's always garbage on the sidewalk, right? Question why your school looks this way, question why there's more police officers and guidance counselors and college counselors within your school, right? We have to question these things, and when we question those things, then that's kind of like the bridge to saying, okay, how can I fix this? Most of the time, it's not even national politics. National politics do matter because, now we have a sexual, I don't want to fucking say his name, but, yeah, we have a thing, in the Supreme Court now, right? And that's, it matters. But what's going to really change, what really controls the funding and where the money goes into different communities and in different districts is where our local elections come in, right? If we can get our people to vote in local elections, right, then we can get our people to vote in national politics. But with the direct impact is going to come from those city council races, those mayor races, state senate races, assembly races, community boards, right? District leaders. These are the races that matter. And when you tell people to question their community, question why things look the way they do, then that's the bridge to getting them to vote.
I'm gonna have Carlene answer, and then we're gonna take another question from the audience.
So really quickly, two things. One is It's like pulling teeth being on my community board. I joined my community board because it matters, right? I don't have any time in my schedule. I have to sit there 3 meetings a month, 4 hours each meeting. Nothing comes out of the meeting. But I'm helping move things and get things out of these meetings. You have to start participating. The city stuff is so critical. In 2021, right? So right now in the city council, there's 51 city council seats, only 11 women. 11 women of 51. Today, the Lower East Side Girls Club, I'm working with them. They're launching a campaign school so that young girls get into campaign pipelines at the age of 13 and 14 because it's critical when we only have 11 of 51 represented on our city. 2020, there's going to be a census. It is critical. If nothing you take from this conversation right now, it is to vote locally and to participate and start talking right now to everyone you know about the census. For the first time in the history of the United States, they're putting a citizenship question. They're trying to put a citizenship question on the census. That has never happened. That means that Latinos and other people of color are not going to fill it out. There could be 10 citizens in one household and one person that's a legal permanent resident. No one's going to fill it out because they're going to be scared for that one person that's not a citizen. So the census means how much money comes from the federal government to our local communities. That determines how much education funding we get, how much everything we get. Infrastructure support, capital funding, our buildings get funded through federal dollars. They are hoping to undercount us in California and other states with large immigrant communities. And so voting, I would say you turn around and say, listen, we're working on messing up that whole electoral college thing, but it is critical you show up and get familiar with voting, period. Because it is the only tool we have to resist in numbers. Hitting the streets is powerful. I brought 30, 40,000 people out when I've worked with some of the women and some of the other folks that are sitting right here. We can pull people out, but unless those people end up voting or filling out a census application, no one's gonna care. None of that power and energy is going to be translated into anything that can change anything unless people vote and care. And they purposefully have not taught us how to vote. They taught us everything in school, up until 12th grade in high school, except having a day where we went to go vote. Why? They don't want us to vote.
One more thing. Last day to register to vote in New York State is literally tomorrow. So tell your friends, tell your neighbors, do a party, do a vote, register to vote.
Does anyone else have a question? I feel like I saw hands. Yeah.
My name is Chantal. I just wanted to say thank you for this panel. I think you guys saw me nodding a lot because I feel like I agreed with everything you guys were saying. I'm not Latina. I'm probably Latina by the fact that I always clap when everybody's black. And I was actually a little nervous to come here today because I know the target audience is not black people. But that being said, I believe, I don't actually see it as like a black versus Latino thing. I personally think we're all black and I see us all as black. Like if I was walking past you on the street, I'd be like, my peeps, like we black, we in this together. You know, like when everything is happening in the news, Justice for Junior, all that stuff, like we were up in arms too. And for me, I married into a Puerto Rican family. My in-laws are Puerto Rican. And my husband used to always joke, my mom doesn't like black girls, but that's not true, she loves me. But in the jest comes a serious issue, which is the othering of blackness and seeing it as separate from yourself. And my question has to deal more with how do you bridge the gap and sort of reach across the table and have that conversation, because for me as a black person, I see this as an issue that pertains to all of us, everyone. If you are a person of color, I am with you. It doesn't matter, you can be, as long as you're not white, I'm on your side. And I see it as an issue. That came out wrong. But you know what I mean? I'm fine with white people too. But I mean it in a sense that like I see it as an us. Like in my community, like we are all mixed up together. When I'm on the train, I see everyone together. But I find myself being hesitant when it comes to speaking to Latinos, specifically because they separate themselves from black people. I know I was very hesitant to even date someone who was Latino because I was afraid that I would get that same thing, like, why are you with a black girl? Or their family is beneath us. And I had that, for me, and I can only speak from my experience, I get the impression that Latinos tend to think they're better than black people and they separate themselves from us. Whereas from the other side, I view us as equals and my community tends to view it that same way. And I've had conversations with Latinos who darker than me, who explicitly said, I am not black. this does not pertain to me, I don't care. And how do you have that conversation without stepping on toes or diminishing how someone identifies about themselves? Because even today, for me, every time you guys said black and brown, I'm like, why do they keep saying black and brown? Like, why can't we just be people of color? Because where I went to school, brown referred more to Indian or Southeast Asians, but not necessarily, I don't think of Latinos when I think of brown. And that just goes to the difference of our communities. Like, we are all people of color. So even just the term black, brown was like triggering me. I was like, what the fuck? Like, it keeps happening. The separating. Like, to me, like, we're all people of color, and we shouldn't have these delineating terms. Like, Black Lives Matters, but like, when we're shouting Black Lives Matter, we're including you guys in it. Like, you know, because you guys are getting shot just as much as us, even if it's not making it to the news. So how do we have that conversation with our fellow, I even hate saying Latinos, because I'm like, y'all are us. So how do you have that conversation to say, like, we care about your issues, you should care about our issues too, we should all be allies, but technically we're in it together, so it's not allies. But is that making sense? Like, how do we bridge that gap so that we are all on the same side?
I think what Ramon said earlier was the best way of actually trying to bridge that gap is understanding one another's struggles and realizing that we're in the struggle together. And something you said that took me off, like, you said, how do you say without stepping on people's toes? I think for the most part, we have to start stepping on people's toes. We can never go far. We can't really accomplish anything if we don't feel uncomfortable. It's not fine to feel comfortable. And we can never progress and be better if we're comfortable and we feel like we're not stepping on people's toes. If we actually want to broaden the conversation, actually start forcing, in other terms, like literally forcing our community to realize and understand that we're in the struggle together and we have to unite, and there shouldn't be a separation between one another. For a lot of people, it's uncomfortable. Even having the conversation is uncomfortable. For my family, I'm pretty sure I'll go and I'll mention how some of them are racist and some faces will turn pale and they'll be real uncomfortable, but that's just what I have to do so that they can actually realize, like, this is not okay and what I'm doing is not okay, and they can actually potentially have a change of mind. So it's like, it's no one close to me, but it's like, I go to like these family reunions with distant family members who I haven't seen in 5 years, 6 years, and it's like they make certain comments that is like, really? So then you always have to be there to respond and be the counter argument to that. And if it makes them feel uncomfortable, so would be. We have to start making people feel uncomfortable if we want to accomplish something.
Anyone else want to answer?
Sorry. I definitely hear you out when you mentioned the whole triggering of the black and brown thing. I think that as people of color, when we talk about Blacks and Latinos, it's because specifically we've been living together and in community for so much longer than other communities of color. And then when you add in Southeast Asians or AAPI community, it starts to get a little tricky because they too have their own issues based on when they migrated here, what was happening in their home country, whether they care about Black or brown people, because sometimes they don't even see themselves as brown, right? And I worked with communities across New York City. I worked for the New York Immigration Coalition for 3 years. And like, that was a huge issue that there were young Southeast Asians in Queens that were super radical, LGBTQ, and their parents were like, you are not Black, you are not Latino, you are not to be hanging out with those people, right? So I want to make sure we center that. Like, how do we talk about being people of color in a way that's more unifying and hold ourselves accountable for not triggering more divisiveness? So I want to like say thank you to you for that, because that's something that we all have to keep thinking about, because yes, claps. Divisiveness is, you know, in how we've been conditioned for so long to be divisive about everything that, yeah, conversations are more difficult. Oftentimes when I have those difficult conversations with folks and I'm code switching, I anchor it in something that they have a really strong belief in. If you have a really strong belief, a lot of our abuelitas been through some crazy-ish with reproductive justice. Like, we could leave it at that, right? Birth control didn't exist in Cuba. What? You was gonna have every baby that you was pregnant with and that's it. You know, like those conversations, when you're having those across cultures, it's easier to then get to the top line, you know, these other issues once you root it in something that they agree with, right? And especially when you think about at what time the person you're talking to migrated here, right? Whether it's a Black person from South Carolina, right? Or whether it is someone
come from the Congo, right? Like, what is their context for relations among people of color? And how can you be a tool or a resource to better empower or support unity? Because people come here and we're all predisposed with all these biases, right? People teach us to fear each other. People tell us all these things that are wrong with each other, and then it harbors itself in different ways. So the reality is, like, it's so exhausting, but always holding ourselves accountable. When someone else says something that's a better point than mine, I'm like, yeah, that's a better point. Like, kudos to you. I'm not here to always think I'm right. Community and building a unity is something that takes effort from everybody, not just the people that are supposed to lead space or be the leaders. It's up to everybody.
I'm gonna ask one last question and then we're gonna wrap up. And I just want to thank you for, posing that. I think that's really important in our community. I think, all the panelists touched on the fact that we still kind of separate us from the Black community and how that's problematic. With that said, within the Black community, there is something they do with their children called the talk. They talk to their kids about like the Black experience and what they're gonna be experiencing with white people. They tell them how to behave if there's a police officer. We don't really have that talk in the Latinx community so much. So I'm gonna leave this question for Luis. How can we sort of like encourage the Latinx community to start having those kind of conversations, those kind of talks with their children in preparation?
So to be completely honest, I didn't have the talk at all, and that's not something that by culture or by nature Latinos don't really have. And that's because most of the time we separate our issues of oppression from the Black community, which is what I think the whole conversation was based off today, that we need to start being united. But as a young person, I would say, I hope that those issues no longer are there. And I think that my mom, per se, never expected us to have those run-ins with the law, because we, like she said, we need to acknowledge our privilege. We have fairer skin, we are more passable, like some white people say, and it's like, we feel more comfortable. So it's like, I think that's why, for the most part, Latinos avoid that conversation, but we definitely need to start having it, because at the end of the day, our brothers and sisters are being killed as well. Our uncles, our fathers, or whatever family relatives are being incarcerated almost at the same rates as Blacks, and we also need to start having a conversation within our homes. And it's always, whether it starts at your dinner table or at a community board meeting, we need to just start the conversation and start protecting one another, and realize that if having the talk or a talk is necessary to possibly prevent something from happening, then we need to have it. And to quickly touch base on something that she brought up and something you mentioned is like code switching. I had the privilege of attending a private school. I went to Catholic school since the 2nd grade all the way till I graduated 8th grade, based on having I was much more advanced than other kids, and I got full scholarship into the school. So I was allowed that education. I was taught that we need to speak more eloquently in certain environments, and we need to have better language and use different vocabulary in certain rooms. But that's not taught in regular public schools, and that's not a privilege that every kid could have. And that's like the basics and like the standard of like how a police officer will even acknowledge or respect you the way that you talk to them. So if you're able to code switch, then automatically you have that privilege, because they feel some sort of common ground, because you're talking the same as them, you're using the same vocabulary as them. So we just have to start being much more supportive and start having the talk and being braver and having courage and standing up with our Black brothers and sisters.
All right, you're the last person.
And if I can leave, with you guys with hope, I actually had the talk when I was in high school, and the talk wasn't just me in the room. It was one of my high school teachers, who is now a lifelong mentor, and it was a group of us who, were super close friends, and it was Black, Latino, and he sat us all in a room one day, and he had the talk with us, the talk that our parents never had, most of us. And through that talk, I didn't look around the room and question, oh, my friend is Black, or like, my friend is Latino, I'm Latino, why am I getting this talk, right? I listened to what he was saying, and I was like, this shit is real. We're in the struggle together. And the only way we're gonna keep each other safe is if we stick together, right? And a lot of times with all these struggles that are happening now in our country, in our own communities, we forget that young people from every generation progresses a little bit more. And that young people are the future and are paving this new way of a progressive and more and better country, for our people. And if, I don't think that we can continue to have these conversations without shedding light to those young people who are out there doing the work every day, who are out there engaging their own people their age, and acknowledging that there's effort being made and that we're in this together.
Thank you. Can we give a round of applause for conversation, and thanks again to our panelists. Thanks.
Okay, no, let's take a seriously. Just want to thank everybody. Also, Jeff and hello. I don't think I even knew this. I'm so loud. But anyway, you know what? I have. Over here. I have 2 boys, and I walked out of the room like 5 times because I'm so excited about everything you had to say. As an older person, not an older person, but older than you guys, you worry about the future, and you worry about all of you understanding what's going on in our world. And I left this room today inspired by everything you all have to say. So I want to thank you all. Everything that happened with the movie, we know it's a wonderful movie, and it couldn't come at a more opportune time because, as we all know, and everybody's mentioned here, we're being judged by the color of our skin. And yet, what I see today here is that's exactly what's uniting us. That's our badge of honor. And it is a privilege for me and for all of us representing American Entertainment Marketing Group to be here today and to listen to all of you. So we want to thank you so much for your patience, and thank you for being here. And I hope, of course, the movie is wonderful, and I hope we all do get to see it and enjoy it.
Once again, guys, thank you so much for coming this evening. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. We hope the panel inspired you guys to find your voice and change the world.
Yes.